Okay, picking up from the last video, we already covered the political structure, which helps us understand how government power is determined. Is it a autarky, where power is consolidated in the hands of a single governing entity unaccountable to the people? Or is it democracy, where power is vested in the hands of the people, either directly through referendums or indirectly through elected officials? That political structure gives us a lot of understanding of government power. But another question comes up when looking at public choice, right? Government involvement. And that is, what goods are going to be provided by the government? And quite frankly, who's going to get them? The debate that surrounds the public goods provided by the government, is one that's ongoing in all countries, okay? Whether they're autocratic or democratic. One criteria that's used is fairness. Some people believe that there are certain goods that everyone should have access to, whether they have the means or not. If we go back to this model here, our circular flow, remember there's income flowing from firms to households, okay? Some people are going to have really high incomes. Okay? Some people are going to have really low incomes. So the theory of fairness is, if you have income flowing to households and some people can't buy food, then the government should tax the people that have food and provide food to those that don't. If you have income flowing to households and some people can't buy health care, then the government should tax the people that can and provide health care to those that don't have it, so on and so forth. In essence, the government is taxing those that have certain goods via the marketplace to provide the goods to the people that don't have them. Another type of good that may be provided by the government is based on market failures. Some highly valued goods will simply not be produced by markets. So government may step in and serve as a remedy for the market failure. The types of goods are those that are non-rival and non-excludable. Let's look at these specifically. Non-rivalry means that many people can simultaneously benefit from the good. So if we look at a interstate highway, well, many people can use an interstate highway at the same time. So once you build it, a lot of people can simultaneously benefit. So highways have a lot of value to people. But these market failures occur when a good is at the same time non-excludable, meaning that if you build it, you can't exclude non-payers. So in that case, no private enterprise is going to be incentivized to make the good. In other words, a private business is not likely to go and start up production of a good that they can't prevent non-payers from getting, that they can't exclude non-payers from getting, because they would have all the costs of production, but then the people could get their good for free. So imagine a highway that you could not put a toll booth on, right? Because obviously you can make a highway excludable, and you do that by putting a toll booth. But if you can't do that, then a highway would be a non-excludable good, and no, enterprising entrepreneur, profit-seeking entrepreneur would go and build a highway and get all those costs, only to find out they can't exclude non-payers. By the way, the non-payers would be called free riders, because they could get the benefits without paying for them. Another example would be a lighthouse. Historically, governments have built lighthouses. These are the lighthouses that help ships find a point of entry on shore. And what happens is, if you go out and build a lighthouse, you are producing something that has a lot of value to a lot of ships, right? A lot of captains, because they can all benefit simultaneously. If there's a dozen ships out there, they can all look at the light simultaneously and use that to guide them in. But you're also producing a good that's non-excludable, which means you're going to get all the costs of building that lighthouse, and then you turn it on, and they're going to get it for free. You can't exclude non-payers. So you have a free rider problem, And that means that there's less incentive for a business person to actually produce a lighthouse. Business people like to make profits. They like to get costs, but at the same time be able to charge people to get access to the good they produce and cover the cost and earn a profit. Non-excludable goods preclude them from getting that revenue. They get all the costs without the revenue. But these are important goods. Okay, lighthouses are important. Another example is national defense. National defense is usually the most basic justification for government to exist. Why? Because the market doesn't produce national defense very well. You go out as an individual and assemble an army, you're going to get all the costs, and then a bunch of people that don't have to pay to get the benefits of that defense. It's non-rival. A lot of people benefit from national defense, but it's non-excludable. Once it's produced, once you've got the army, anybody that lives in the country is going to benefit from it, whether they pay or not. And to prove that point, look at our current situation. In the US, we have the federal government producing national defense, but not everybody pays taxes. So a lot of people get the benefits of national defense, but they don't pay for it. Okay? A business isn't going to do that, right? They won't produce something unless they can exclude you from getting it. All right, so there's really two reasons we would see public goods being provided by the government. One is market failures. We need the good, it's important, but market forces won't make it. The other one is fairness. The good's getting made, the market's not failing. We do have food and healthcare and education produced in the marketplace, but some people don't have access to it and other people do. And under the guise of fairness, the government is going to provide those goods to the people that don't have the means. Okay, now that we have the four broad institutions of property rights, decision-making, public choices, and incentives, we can look at the core economic systems. Remember, economic systems are just composites of institutions, and countries tend to gravitate towards certain economic systems. For example, the economic system called planned socialism typically involves socialism, public ownership of property, centralized decision-making, central planning, right? The government directs resources and is all-powerful. Primarily moral and punitive incentives, right? So not as much material, more moral and punitive, and autocratic political system. So these tend to go together and create countries like North Korea or Cuba. Market socialism, in contrast, has public ownership of property, so socialism, right, in property rights, but has decentralized decision-making, right? Has more market forces in its decisions. It's more moral and material incentives, and the system politically tends to be more democratic. Okay? Some people see market socialism as trying to have the best of both worlds, trying to have collective ownership of everything, but still get the economic growth and prosperity that comes from markets as decision-making, moral and material incentives, and democracy. Then we have capitalism, and capitalism is generally private ownership of property, decentralized decision-making, markets, moral and material incentives, but primarily material, and democratic political systems. Okay? So you can think of this as kind of one extreme, and this as the other extreme, and this a little bit of both. But it's really not that clear when we get into the details later on, but for now, that's a good way to start off. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that we do have real-world examples of planned socialism, the Soviet Union being the most visceral in terms of its effects. I mean, there's still people today that will tell you about what they experienced in the Soviet Union. And we certainly know capitalism because that's the majority of the first world today. Europe, Australia, Canada, the US, and many other parts of the world. But this market socialism is a little harder to find real-world examples of, which leads some people to question its tenability. This idea that you can have collective ownership of property, but then have all these more capitalist kind of characteristics. So for many people today, market socialism might be a fleeting experience. It might occur en route to planned socialism or en route to capitalism, but may not be a long-term viable economic system. Okay? So we'll talk more about market socialism later, but today in the world, we generally define countries either as planned socialist, which is limited but still a clear definition, or capitalist and the various styles of capitalism that we'll get into later. Okay? Now, what about these terms? Communism, fascism, democratic socialism, and there's many others. We have to be aware that what these terms mean to one person could be different than what they mean to another. And these terms do not always have the kind of clear definitions and denotations that these terms do, right? I don't know that you can get much more clearly defined than what we've done here. But let's just give a kind of general overview of each of these. So communism is, I think, best defined as a form of planned socialism that is led by a workers' revolution under the Marxist style. Okay, we'll talk about Marx later on. Fascism is a type of planned socialism that is led by government power, okay, where the government effectively just takes over and then creates a socialist system. And democratic socialism is a type of planned socialism that is voted in through a democratic process. So again, keeping it simple, because we don't have clear definitions for these, I think it's easy to associate all three with planned socialism, but more about how we get that planned socialism, how it takes root in a particular nation. Let's wrap up this section with contrasting comparative economic systems, which is what we are studying from comparative economics. Comparative economic systems studies international economic data to correlate how economic systems influence economic outcomes. So we talk about how capitalism influences economic growth, or how socialism influences economic growth, how capitalism influences unemployment, how socialism influences unemployment, those types of things. We're focused on comparing the economic systems and their effects on a variety of economic variables that are important to us. In contrast, comparative economics studies international economic data, but it's correlating how economic variables influence each other. So we might want to know how taxes actually affect national debt. And that means we need to control for the economic system. And we do this through what's called a dummy variable. We assign the economic system a number. You know, maybe we assign 1 to capitalism and 2 to socialism, that kind of thing. But this allows us to collect our data and hold constant the economic system. Take a look at this data down here. We have the variables, which include the economic system, personal tax burden, and national debt of the US, Sweden, and Cuba. Okay? If I want to know how taxes affect national debt, then I want to control for the economic system. So assign the economic system 1 to US and Sweden, capitalism, and 2 to Cuba, planned socialism. And then I look at the relationship. Personal tax burden is low in the US and the national debt is high. Whereas in Sweden, personal tax burden is high and the national debt is low. I've got a inverse relationship between tax burden and national debt. Taxes go down, national debt goes up. Taxes go up, national debt goes down. And I'm confident in that relationship because the economic system has been controlled for. However, if I try to compare the US to Cuba, you know, I still get with these two variables an inverse relationship, right? Low taxes, high debt, high taxes, low debt. But I don't know if that relationship exists because it's possible that Cuba's different economic system is causing the low national debt or causing the high tax burden. Therefore, I can't rule out the economic system and draw a connection between these variables that I'm trying to do with comparative economics. All right, that's it, guys. If you have questions, let me know.